A Hell's Angel rushed a fainted little girl to the hospital. What happened next will make you cry. Jack roared down Main Street on his Harley-Davidson, the powerful engine rumbling beneath him like a living beast. The vibration traveled up through his body, as familiar as his own heartbeat after 20 years with the Hells Angels. The late afternoon sun warmed his weathered face, catching on the silver streaks in his beard and the worn leather of his vest, decorated with patches that told stories most people would never understand. Today was one of those rare, perfect riding days. Clear blue skies stretched overhead, the spring air crisp but not cold. Jack had the road mostly to himself, a blessing in the usually crowded city streets. Finally, some peace and quiet, Jack muttered to himself, his voice lost in the wind and engine noise. Or the club had been busy lately. Too many meetings, too many problems to solve, too many young hotheads needing guidance. As an elder member, Jack found himself playing peacemaker more often than he liked. Today's solo ride was his reward for keeping things together during last night's tense gathering. He slowed at a red light, planting one booted foot on the asphalt. His calloused fingers drummed against the handlebar as he waited, taking in the city around him. Office workers hurried along sidewalks, eager to get home. A street vendor packed up his hot dog cart. Normal people living normal lives. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Sometimes Jack wondered what that might be like. Not that he'd trade his brotherhood for anything, but at 45, the constant drama could wear on a man. The light turned green, and Jack rolled on the throttle, feeling the immediate surge of power. This was freedom. This was what kept him sane. He turned onto Riverside Drive, where the buildings thinned out, and he could catch glimpses of the water between them. The sun reflected off glass windows, momentarily blinding him as he adjusted his sunglasses. Jack patted the inside pocket of his vest, feeling the reassuring shape of the envelope there. His rent money, finally. The club's auto shop had been busier than usual, and his cut-as head mechanic would keep a roof over his head for another month. Not bad for a high school dropout, he said with a gruff laugh. The neighborhood changed as he rode, becoming less polished, more lived in. This was the part of town tourists never saw, where working people stretched their dollars and hoped for better days. Jack knew these streets well. He'd grown up not far from here, before his life took its unexpected turns. He slowed the bike as he approached another intersection, scanning the road ahead out of habit. 20 years on motorcycles had taught him to trust no one in traffic. Cars were deadly weapons in careless hands, and he had the scars to prove it. A group of kids played basketball in a side street, using a milk crate nailed to a telephone pole as a makeshift hoop. Their shouts and laughter carried over his engine noise. Jack nodded at them as he passed. One boy, brave or foolish, raised his hand in a wave. Jack lifted 2 fingers off his handlebar in return, a minimal acknowledgement. The kids probably saw him as a dangerous outlaw, a criminal on wheels. But little did they know he spent most of his time fixing carburetors and settling petty disputes among grown men who sometimes acted like children. As he cruised past a row of small businesses, a laundromat, a convenience store with bars on its windows, a check-cashing place, Jack's attention was drawn to something unusual on the sidewalk ahead. At first, he thought someone had tossed out a bundle of clothes, but as he drew closer, the shape resolved into something that made his blood run cold. A small figure lay crumpled on the concrete, not moving. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, immediately slowing his bike. He pulled to the curb with a screech of tires, kickstand down in one practiced motion. 3 long strides brought him to the tiny form on the sidewalk. It was a little girl, no more than 5 years old. Yet her clothes were dirty and torn, her thin arms like twigs. Her face, half hidden by tangled hair, was pale as paper. She lay completely still, except for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs as he knelt beside her. "Hey, kid," he said, his gruff voice softening. "Can you hear me?" The girl's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A faint whimper escaped her lips. "Jesus," Jack breathed, panic rising in his throat as he realized how serious this was. A desperate race against time. Jack's calloused hands trembled as they cradled the little girl's fragile body. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird with hollow bones. Her skin felt cool to the touch, too cool, and that scared him more than anything. "Hang on, kid," he whispered, his gruff voice cracking with worry. Around them, where people walked by on the sidewalk. A few glanced over, curiosity quickly replaced by discomfort as they hurried past. Nobody stopped. Nobody offered help. Jack didn't waste time being angry about it. The girl needed a hospital, and she needed it now. With careful movements that belied his bulky frame, Jack shifted her small body against his chest, supporting her head in the crook of his arm. Her eyelids fluttered once, revealing a glimpse of blue before closing again. A tiny sound escaped her lips, somewhere between a sigh and a moan. "I got you," Jack said, rising to his feet. "Just stay with me." He carried her to his motorcycle, mind racing through options. An ambulance would take too long to arrive in this neighborhood. Waiting wasn't an option. Every instinct told him this little girl didn't have time to spare. Jack looked down at his Harley, then at the child in his arms. He'd never carried a passenger so small before. For a split second, doubt crept in. Was this safe? But a glance at her pale face pushed the question aside. Nothing was more dangerous than doing nothing. He settled onto the seat, positioning the girl carefully in front of him. Her limp body slumped against his chest as he wrapped his left arm securely around her, holding her tight against him. With his right hand on the throttle, he kicked up the stand. "Memorial Hospital," he muttered to himself. 8 blocks east. Jack knew the route by heart. 3 years ago, he'd visited a brother from the club there every day for 2 weeks, until the man finally lost his battle with injuries from a crash. The memory tightened his grip on the girl. The engine roared to life, at the familiar vibration traveling through both their bodies. The girl didn't react to the noise, which worried Jack even more. He eased into traffic, hyper-aware of every bump and turn that might jostle his precious cargo. Cars honked as he weaved between lanes, but Jack tuned them out. He hunched over the girl, creating a human shield with his body. The wind whipped at his beard as he pushed the speed limit, taking corners faster than he should. At a red light, Jack glanced down at her face. Her lips had a bluish tint now. Her breathing seemed even shallower than before, each inhale a struggle. "No, no, no," he growled. "Stay with me, kid." The light hadn't changed, but Jack revved the engine and shot through the intersection anyway. A car swerved, horn blaring. Jack didn't look back, though people on the sidewalk turned at the sound of his approaching motorcycle. Their expressions changed from annoyance to shock as they saw the burly, leather-clad biker cradling a small child against his chest. Jack ignored their stares, focused entirely on the road ahead and the increasingly dead weight in his arm. He felt her body shudder. A tiny hand reflexively clutched at his vest, then fell away. "Almost there," Jack promised, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just hold on a little longer." The hospital came into view, its emergency entrance lit up like a beacon. Jack leaned into the final turn, tires squealing as he aimed directly for the ambulance bay. He cut the engine just short of the doors and dismounted in one fluid motion, the girl secure in his arms. Jack burst through the sliding doors, the bright fluorescent lights momentarily blinding him after the dimming evening outside. The sudden quiet after the roar of his motorcycle was jarring. "Help!" he shouted, his deep voice echoing in the waiting room. "This girl needs help right now." The scene froze for a heartbeat. Patients looking up from old magazines, the security guard half rising from his chair, the receptionist pausing with her hand over a keyboard. They all stared at the unlikely pair, a massive Hell's Angel in a leather vest covered in patches, holding a tiny, unconscious child like she was made of glass. Then training kicked in. 2 nurses rushed forward, a gurney appearing as if from nowhere. Jack found himself surrounded by hospital staff in scrubs, their voices overlapping as they fired questions at him. "Here's what happened. Is she your daughter? How long has she been unconscious?" Jack struggled to answer, his throat suddenly tight. "Found her collapsed on the sidewalk. Don't know how long. She's barely breathing." A nurse with kind eyes and quick hands reached for the girl. "We'll take care of her now, sir." For a moment Jack hesitated, reluctant to let go. The child had become his responsibility the moment he'd spotted her on that sidewalk. But he forced his arms to release her, watching as gentle hands transferred her tiny form to the gurney. "Please," Jack said, the word unfamiliar in his mouth. "Help her." Jack couldn't sit still. The plastic chairs in the waiting room seemed designed to torture people already on edge. He paced instead, his heavy boots making dull thuds against the linoleum floor. Back and forth. 5 steps one way, turn, 5 steps back. The clock on the wall ticked away minutes that felt like hours. Each time the double doors to the emergency area swung open, Jack's head snapped up, hope flaring in his chest only to die again when it wasn't news about the little girl. Other people in the waiting room kept their distance. A mother pulled her son closer when Jack walked near them. An elderly man clutched his wife's hand tighter. Jack was used to it, the Hell's Angels patch on his back, the tattoos crawling up his neck, the weathered leather vest. They all screamed danger to most folks. Usually that suited him just fine. Today, it just made him feel more alone. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the clock again. 47 minutes had passed since they'd wheeled the girl away. Jack tried to piece together what might have happened to her. The ragged clothes, the thinness of her arms, the way her ribs had shown through her dirty t-shirt. She looked half-starved. But why was she alone? Where were her parents? The questions circled his mind like vultures. A set of footsteps approached, and Jack turned to see a doctor walking toward him. The woman's face looked tired, deep lines around her eyes that spoke of too many long shifts. She clutched a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "You brought in the young girl?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. Jack nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "Is she okay?" The doctor gestured to the chairs. "Let's sit down, Mr. Jack. Just Jack is fine." He reluctantly lowered himself into one of the torture devices they called chairs. "How is she?" "She's stable, but very weak." The doctor, her name tag read Dr. Patel, sat beside him. "She's suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. From what we can tell, she hasn't eaten properly in days, maybe weeks." Jack's hands tightened into fists on his knees. "But you're feeding her now, right? Getting her what she needs?" Dr. Patel's expression tightened. "That's what I needed to discuss with you. We're facing some difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" Jack's voice dropped, a hint of danger creeping in. "There's been a citywide shortage of supplies. Budget cuts have hit us hard, and then a mix-up with our regular delivery. She sighed, rubbing at her forehead. We're out of basic nutritional supplements, the kind this child desperately needs. We've put in an emergency order, but it won't arrive until tomorrow at the earliest. Jack stared at her, disbelief turning quickly to anger. You're telling me this hospital has no food? Nothing to give a starving kid? We have some basics, of course, but nothing with the proper nutrients to help her recover quickly. The specialized formula we need for severe cases like hers. Dr. Patel stopped, noticing Jack's darkening expression. We're doing everything else we can. IV fluids, monitoring her heart rate, keeping her comfortable. Jack stood up abruptly. Not good enough, Doc? Sir, please understand. No, you understand. Jack loomed over her, his voice low but intense. That little girl is not dying because of some delivery mix-up. Not today, not when I can do something about it. He pulled his phone from his pocket. It's an old flip model that had survived years of drops and crashes. Dr. Patel watched with a mixture of confusion and concern as Jack dialed a number from memory. Bones, Jack said when the call connected. Need your help? Memorial Hospital. Emergency. He paused, listening. Yeah, that's the one. Listen, they've got no supplies here. Need food? Good stuff. Protein shakes, those meal bars you're always eating, fruit, anything nutritious you can get your hands on. Another pause. For a kid, little girl, just do it, okay? Call the others too. As many as you can reach. Jack snapped the phone shut and turned back to Dr. Patel, who was watching him with wide eyes. My guys will be here soon with whatever they can find. Just tell me what she needs most, and we'll get it. The doctor blinked rapidly, clearly caught off guard. High-protein foods would be best. Bananas, peanut butter, yogurt for when she's ready for solids. And if anyone can find Pediasure or similar supplements. Jack was already dialing another number. You'll have it all in 30 minutes. That's a promise. His eyes, usually hard and guarded, burned with determination. Nobody's giving up on this kid, not on my watch. Jack stood beside the hospital bed, his large frame looking out of place among the sterile white sheets and beeping machines. The little girl looked even smaller against the hospital pillow. Her blonde hair fanned out like a halo. She was still unconscious, but the nurse had assured him that her vitals were improving. The IV dripped steadily, delivering fluids her tiny body desperately needed. His leather jacket creaked as he lowered himself into the plastic chair beside her bed. It wasn't built for someone his size, but he didn't care about comfort right now. His eyes never left her face, watching for any sign of movement, any flicker that might mean she was waking up. You're a fighter, kid, he whispered, just like me. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes passing in the hallway. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. He wasn't a praying man, hadn't been in decades, but he found himself hoping with everything he had that this little girl would pull through. A soft knock on the door frame made him look up. Bones stood there, his tall, lanky figure filling the doorway. Despite his nickname, there wasn't anything skeletal about the man except his unusually long fingers. He carried 2 grocery bags in each hand. Got what you asked for, Bones said quietly, stepping into the room. The others are bringing more. Tank's getting those special drinks the doc mentioned. Jack nodded, standing to take the bags. Thanks, brother. Bones peered at the little girl, his usual tough expression softening. She gonna make it? She will, Jack said firmly. It wasn't a hope anymore. It was a decision he'd made. Doc says she's stabilizing. Bones set the bags down on a small table by the window. What happened to her? Where's her folks? Jack shook his head. Don't know yet. Found her collapsed on the sidewalk over by Hawkins Street. No ID, nothing. He began unpacking the bags, arranging the food items neatly. And Bones had brought bananas, protein bars, several containers of yogurt, and bottled water. Nurses are checking with police, see if anyone's reported a missing kid. Bones nodded, lingering by the doorway. You need anything else, you call. We're all around. After Bones left, Jack returned to his chair beside the girl. The hospital had cleaned her up, replacing her dirty clothes with a pale blue gown that swallowed her small frame. Her face, now washed, revealed a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. She couldn't be more than 5 years old. Jack had never been good with kids, never thought about having any of his own. The life he'd chosen didn't leave room for that kind of responsibility. Yet here he sat, unable to leave this child's side, feeling a protectiveness he hadn't experienced since his early days with the Angels. A nurse came in to check the girl's vitals, smiling gently at Jack. Her color's looking better, she said, adjusting the IV line. The doctor was surprised by how quickly friends responded with supplies. They're not just friends, Jack said. They're family. The nurse nodded, making a note on her clipboard. It makes a difference having someone here for her. Some of these kids... She trailed off, shaking her head. It's good you found her when you did. After she left, Jack settled back in his chair, feeling the exhaustion of the day catching up with him. The adrenaline that had carried him through finding the girl, rushing her to the hospital, and rallying his brothers was wearing off. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, there was a slight movement from the bed. Jack straightened up, instantly alert, and the little girl's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Confusion filled her blue eyes as she took in her surroundings, the unfamiliar room, the tubes in her arm. Then her gaze landed on Jack. Instead of fear, the reaction he was used to getting from children, her expression softened slightly. She didn't smile, but some of the tension left her tiny body. "Hey there," Jack said, keeping his deep voice as gentle as possible. "You're okay now? You're safe?" The girl looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand who he was and why he was there. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She seemed too weak to speak. Jack leaned closer, careful not to crowd her. "I'm Jack. I found you on the street and brought you to the hospital. The doctors are taking good care of you." The little girl's eyelids began to droop again, with the brief moment of consciousness fading. But before she slipped back into sleep, her small hand moved slightly toward him on the blanket. Not quite reaching, but trying. Jack carefully placed his rough, weathered hand next to hers, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his presence. As she drifted back to sleep, Jack noticed her breathing seemed more peaceful than before, less labored. She looked comfortable, maybe even feeling safe despite the strange surroundings. The night had fallen, casting long shadows across the hospital room. Jack had barely moved from his chair, his large frame hunched forward, watching the steady rise and fall of the little girl's chest. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting the IV, offering him coffee that grew cold in his hands. Around midnight, the girl had woken again, but more alert this time. She'd looked at Jack with wide, uncertain eyes, but hadn't spoken a word. The nurse had coaxed her to drink some apple juice through a straw, and Jack had felt a strange surge of pride when she managed to finish most of it before drifting back to sleep. Now, as early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the hospital bed, Jack rubbed his tired eyes. His back ached from the uncomfortable chair, and his mouth felt dry. But he wouldn't leave. Not until he knew she was okay. Not until he knew where she belonged. A soft knock on the doorframe pulled his attention away from the sleeping child. A man in a white coat stood there, his expression serious. The doctor who had first examined the girl when Jack brought her in. "Mr. Williams," the doctor said quietly, for using the name Jack had given at the front desk. "Could I speak with you outside for a moment?" Jack hesitated, his eyes moving back to the girl. She was sleeping peacefully, her color much better than it had been yesterday. "She'll be fine for a few minutes," the doctor assured him. "The nurse will stay with her." Reluctantly, Jack stood, his joints protesting after hours in the same position. He followed the doctor into the hallway, where a young nurse slipped past them to take his place at the bedside. "How is she?" Jack asked, his voice rough from disuse. The doctor's face was grave, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been yesterday. "She's responding well to treatment. The fluids and nutrition are helping, but she was severely malnourished and dehydrated when you brought her in." Jack nodded, the relief washing over him. But something in the doctor's expression kept him from feeling too comfortable. "What else?" The doctor sighed, looking down at the clipboard in his hands. "We've been working with the police to identify her. Based on the description you provided and where you found her, they believe she's Lily Chambers, age 5. "Chambers," Jack repeated, testing the name. It didn't ring any bells. "And her family?" The doctor's expression grew even more somber. "That's what I needed to discuss with you. The police have confirmed that her mother, Sarah Chambers, passed away 3 weeks ago. Cancer. Stage 4. It was very aggressive." Jack felt like someone had punched him in the gut. "And her father?" "Unknown. Not listed on the birth certificate." Jack leaned against the wall, trying to process what he was hearing. When the little girl, Lily, had been alone for 3 weeks? How had she survived? Where had she been staying? "According to neighbors," the doctor continued, seeming to read Jack's thoughts, "Sarah had no family in the area. They thought a family friend had taken Lily after the funeral. No one realized she was—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Jack clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. How could no one notice? How could a 5-year-old girl just slip through the cracks like that? "The police are checking if there are any relatives elsewhere who might take her in," the doctor said. "In the meantime, Child Protective Services will be notified once she's medically cleared." Jack stared through the doorway at the small figure in the hospital bed. Lily. Her name was Lily. 5 years old and completely alone in the world. With no mother, no father, no one looking for her. "How long before she's cleared?" Jack asked, his voice low. "We'd like to keep her at least another day for observation. Make sure she's eating properly and there are no complications." Jack nodded, his mind racing. He'd never thought much about kids before yesterday, never imagined himself responsible for one. But the thought of Lily being handed off to strangers, to the system, made his chest tighten painfully. "Thank you, doctor," he said finally, turning back toward the room. "I appreciate you letting me know." The doctor placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, an unexpected gesture of compassion. "What you did yesterday, bringing her in, staying with her, it made all the difference. You should know that." Jack watched as the doctor walked away, the words echoing in his head. Marty returned to the room, nodding at the nurse who quietly excused herself. Once again, he took his place in the chair beside Lily's bed. Alone in the world. No family to speak of. Just like he had been all those years ago before the angels found him. Before he found his brotherhood. Jack pushed through the hospital's automatic doors and stepped into the warm afternoon sunshine. The brightness made him squint after hours under the harsh fluorescent lights inside. He leaned against the brick wall, letting the heat soak into his tired muscles. His leather vest felt heavy on his shoulders, the weight of everything he'd learned pressing down on him. Lily Chambers, 5 years old. No mother, no father, no one looking for her. He rubbed a rough hand over his face, feeling the stubble that had grown during his overnight vigil. The parking lot in front of him buzzed with activity. Doctors heading home after their shifts, visitors arriving with colorful balloons and flowers, ambulances coming and going. Normal life continuing while his had suddenly veered off course. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Jack pulled it out and read the message from Diesel, his second-in-command. On our way with supplies. Got enough food to feed the whole hospital, ETA 10 minutes. A small smile crossed Jack's weathered face. The Angels might be feared on the streets, but they took care of their own. And somehow, in less than 24 hours, that little girl upstairs had become one of their own. He typed back a quick, "Thanks," and slipped the phone back into his pocket. His mind drifted to what would happen next. The doctor had mentioned child protective services, foster care, or the system. Jack knew all about the system. He'd been through it himself after his parents died when he was 12. 4 different homes in 3 years, each one worse than the last, until he finally ran away at 15. That's when he'd found the Angels, or they'd found him. They'd given him what the system never could. A family, security, belonging. Would Lily find the same? Or would she bounce from home to home, unwanted and forgotten? A young social worker had already visited that morning, clipboard in hand, asking questions about how he'd found Lily, making notes about her condition. She'd been kind enough, with her neat suit and sympathetic smile, but Jack had seen the way she looked at him, at his tattoos, his leather, the Angel's patch on his back. He knew what she was thinking. He wasn't father material. He wasn't even respectable citizen material in most people's eyes. And maybe they were right. What did he know about raising a kid? He lived alone in a small apartment above a bar. His friends were all outlaws and misfits. His life wasn't exactly stable or safe. But then he remembered how Lily had looked at him when she woke up. Not with fear, but with trust. How her tiny hand had reached for his when the nurses were drawing blood, seeking comfort from the only familiar face in the room. Jack pushed himself off the wall and began pacing, his heavy boots scuffing against the concrete. 3 large motorcycles rumbled into the parking lot, drawing stares from people nearby. Jack recognized Diesel's massive frame on the lead bike, followed by Wrench and Doc. Each had saddlebags bulging with supplies. Yars and Diesel had a large cooler strapped to the back of his seat. His brothers, his family, coming to help a child none of them had ever met. Jack walked toward them, raising a hand in greeting. As they dismounted and began unpacking their bounty, a clarity washed over him. He might not be perfect. He might not know the first thing about raising a kid. But he knew what it was like to be alone, to be unwanted, to be shuffled through a system that saw you as nothing but paperwork. Lily deserved better than that. She deserved someone who would fight for her, who would put her first, who would give her stability and love. "You look like hell, brother," Diesel said, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. "How's the kid?" "Better," Jack said, helping to unload packages of bread, fruit, canned goods. Her name's Lily." "Lily," Diesel repeated with a nod. "Pretty name." Jack took a deep breath, the decision crystallizing in his mind even as he said it aloud for the first time. "She's not going into foster care?" His brothers paused, looking at him. "They're talking about CPS, finding a placement for her," Jack continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But I can't let that happen. I won't." "What are you saying, Jack?" Wrench asked, though his expression showed he already knew. Jack squared his shoulders, suddenly sure of his path in a way he hadn't been about anything in years. She's not going to foster care, he muttered to himself as he turned back towards the hospital entrance, ready to claim responsibility for the little girl who had crashed into his life and changed everything in less than a day. But Jack stood at the hospital entrance, discharge papers clutched in his hand. The social worker had looked doubtful, but Jack's determination had won out, at least temporarily. She'd granted him emergency temporary guardianship, with the understanding that there would be home visits and evaluations to follow. Jack had signed every form they put in front of him, his usual scrawl more careful than it had ever been. "Now remember, Mr. Harlan," the nurse said, adjusting Lily's small jacket. "She's still weak. Plenty of rest, fluids, and the medication schedule we wrote down. The doctor wants to see her again next week." Jack nodded, trying to absorb all the instructions. He'd never been responsible for anyone but himself before. The weight of it pressed on his chest, making it hard to breathe. But Lily sat quietly in the wheelchair hospital policy required, looking small and fragile in borrowed clothes from the pediatric ward's donation box. Her dark hair had been washed and brushed, framing a face still too pale, but no longer gray with hunger and exhaustion. "Ready to go, kiddo?" Jack asked, his gruff voice gentler than his friends would have recognized. Lily nodded, her big eyes watching him carefully. She hadn't said much since waking up, just her name and age, answering the doctor's questions with nods or shakes of her head. The psychologist said it might be shock or trauma, that she'd talk when she felt safe. Jack hoped that would be soon. He bent down and carefully lifted her from the wheelchair. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, and he cradled her against his chest, one large hand supporting her back, where through his leather vest he could feel her heart beating like a small bird's. "I've got my bike outside," he told her, as they stepped through the automatic doors. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. "We'll go nice and slow, okay? You just hold on to me." Lily's arms went around his neck, her face nestled against his shoulder. Jack felt something crack open inside him, something that had been hard and frozen for a long time. His Harley waited in the parking lot, gleaming black and chrome under the streetlights. Diesel had brought Jack's spare helmet earlier. It would be too big for Lily, but better than nothing. Jack had also fashioned a makeshift seat belt from some straps, determined to keep her secure. "This is Thunder," Jack said, patting the bike's fuel tank. "He's loud, but he's safe. I've been riding him for 15 years. Lily studied the motorcycle with solemn eyes. "You ever been on a bike before?" Jack asked. She shook her head. "Well, it's fun. Like flying, but better." Jack carefully settled her on the seat, then fixed the helmet on her head. It wobbled slightly, and he tightened the strap as much as he could. "You'll sit right in front of me, and I'll have my arms around you the whole time." He secured the straps he'd rigged up, then mounted the bike behind her, creating a protective cage with his body. "Just lean back against me. I won't let you fall." The engine rumbled to life, and he felt Lily stiffen. Jack placed one hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay. That's just Thunder saying hello." They pulled out of the hospital parking lot, slowly. Jack was hyper-aware of every bump in the road, on every turn. He rode more carefully than he ever had in his life, feeling Lily gradually relax against him as they cruised through the evening streets. The city lights blurred around them as Jack navigated toward his apartment in the old warehouse district. It wasn't much, a converted loft above Riley's bar, but it was home. Clean enough, if a bit cluttered. He'd have to make some changes now that he had a kid to think about. A kid. The thought still stunned him. 20 minutes later, Jack pulled into the alley beside the bar and cut the engine. The back entrance would let them avoid the Friday night crowd inside. He lifted Lily off the bike, her small body warm against him in the cool evening air. "Home sweet home," he said, carrying her up the metal stairs that zigzagged up the building's exterior to the second floor. "It's not fancy, but it's quiet up here, even with the bar downstairs." Jack shifted Lily to one arm as he unlocked the door and flicked on the lights. His apartment appeared before them, one large room with high ceilings and exposed brick walls. A kitchen area occupied one corner, a worn leather couch and TV another. His unmade bed stood against the far wall, clothes draped over a chair beside it. "Like I said, not fancy," Jack muttered, suddenly seeing his living space through new eyes, a child's eyes. It was a bachelor's apartment, not a home for a little girl. He carried Lily to the couch and gently set her down. "You hungry? I think Diesel brought some soup from Maggie's diner." Jack moved to the refrigerator, talking to fill the silence. "Best soup in town. One might be good for your tummy after all that hospital food." While a container of chicken noodle soup heated on the stove, Jack surveyed the apartment, trying to figure out sleeping arrangements. His bed was the only one, but he couldn't take it from her. "Looks like I'm bunking on the couch," he said, more to himself than to Lily. He gathered clean sheets from a cabinet and began transforming his bed into a cozy nest. He tucked in corners with unexpected care, fluffed his pillows, and added an extra blanket in case she got cold. When he finished, Jack stepped back, feeling the full weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This little girl's life was in his hands now. No more thinking just about himself. Every decision, every action would affect Lily too. He turned to find her watching him from the couch, or those solemn eyes following his movements. "It's not much," Jack said, gesturing to the makeshift bed. "But it's yours for as long as you need it, for as long as you're here with me." Jack woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping on the too small couch. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across his apartment floor. For a moment, he forgot why he was sleeping there, instead of in his bed. Then the memories of yesterday crashed back. The little girl. Lily. He sat up quickly, scanning the room. His heart hammered until he spotted the small lump under the covers of his bed. She was still there, still asleep, her dark hair spread across his pillow. Jack rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble against his palms. The clock on the wall showed 7:15. Kids needed breakfast, right? Good breakfast, not the coffee and occasional protein bar that made up his usual morning routine. He stood slowly, trying to be quiet as he shuffled to the kitchen area. Jack opened his refrigerator and stared at the sparse contents. Some eggs, thank goodness. Half a loaf of bread. Milk that was probably still good. He pulled them out and set them on the counter, then began opening cabinets, searching for a pan. When was the last time he'd actually cooked something? Usually, he grabbed food at Riley's downstairs or picked up takeout on the way home. The Hells Angels clubhouse always had something in the pot when they gathered. But that was different. That was Diesel's cooking, not his. Jack finally located a skillet buried behind a stack of bowls. He set it on the stove with a clang that sounded too loud in the quiet apartment. He glanced toward the bed, but Lily didn't stir. "Scrambled eggs," he muttered to himself. "How hard can it be?" He cracked 3 eggs into a bowl, spilling some of the whites onto the counter. With a fork, he began beating them, trying to remember how his mother used to do it when he was a kid. Add milk, salt. He did both, splashing a bit too much milk into the mixture. The stove clicked as he turned on the burner. While waiting for the pan to heat, Jack pulled out 2 plates and set them on his small table. He had no kids' cups, so a regular glass would have to do. He filled it halfway with orange juice. When the pan seemed hot enough, Jack poured in the egg mixture. It sizzled loudly, and he grabbed a spatula, frantically pushing the eggs around as they cooked too quickly on the hot surface. Some stuck to the bottom, was browning more than he wanted. "Shoot," he grumbled, scraping at the pan. Behind him, he heard a soft rustling. Jack turned to see Lily sitting up in bed, watching him with those serious eyes. Her hair stuck out at odd angles, and the oversized t-shirt he'd given her to sleep in hung off one small shoulder. "Morning, kiddo," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "Making breakfast? Hope you like eggs." She didn't answer, just watched him with that quiet gaze that seemed too old for her years. Jack turned back to the stove, determined not to ruin the food completely. The eggs were definitely overcooked in spots, but they'd have to do. He scooped them onto the 2 plates, then popped bread into his rarely used toaster. "You want butter?" he asked over his shoulder. I think I have some somewhere." Lily climbed out of bed and padded across the floor in bare feet. She pulled out one of the chairs and sat, her legs dangling above the floor. Jack found the butter in the back of his refrigerator and managed to spread some on the toast when it popped up, though he tore 1 piece in the process. "Here we go," he said, setting the plates on the table. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. Breakfast of champions. Lily looked at the food, then at Jack. Slowly, she picked up her fork and took a tiny bite of eggs. Jack held his breath, waiting for her reaction. She chewed carefully, then took another bite. Not exactly enthusiasm, but she was eating. Jack felt a strange warmth spread in his chest. Pride, he realized. He'd fed her. It wasn't much, and it wasn't good, but he'd provided something she needed. "I'll get better at this," he promised, watching her eat the simple meal. "Never been much of a cook." Lily nodded slightly, acknowledging his words even if she didn't speak. She nibbled at the toast, taking small, careful bites. Jack sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of his mug. Doubt nagged at him. What did he know about taking care of a child? He had no experience, no training. He lived above a bar, for heaven's sake. But as he watched her eat the breakfast he'd prepared, something settled in him. He'd figure it out. He had to. Jack had just finished cleaning up the breakfast dishes when 3 sharp knocks rattled his apartment door. He tensed, glancing at Lily, who sat cross-legged on the couch, quietly flipping through an old motorcycle magazine he'd found for her. "Stay put. Okay," he said. When he peered through the peephole, he saw 3 familiar faces in the hallway. He unlocked the door and swung it open to find Diesel, Bones, and Tank standing there, their massive frames filling the narrow corridor. Each man wore the signature leather vest with the Hells Angels patches, just like the one hanging on Jack's coat rack. "Well, look who decided to play house," Diesel said, his deep voice rumbling with amusement. At 6'4", with a wild gray beard, he was the oldest of the bunch at 52. Tank pushed past him, carrying 2 large paper bags. "Got the stuff you asked for," he said, his bald head gleaming under the hallway lights. "Plus some extra," added Bones, the lankiest of the 3, holding up another bag. "My sister has kids. Said you might need this stuff." Jack stepped back, letting them into his apartment. Their heavy boots thumped on the wooden floor as they entered, making the place feel suddenly smaller. All 3 men stopped when they spotted Lily on the couch. "So this is her, huh?" Diesel said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a whisper, but still carried through the apartment. Lily looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of 3 large, leather-clad men filling Jack's living room. She drew her knees up to her chest, watching them warily. "Guys, this is Lily," Jack said. "Lily, these are some friends of mine." Tank set his bags on the kitchen counter and started unpacking them. "Got bread, cereal, milk, some fruit. Wasn't sure what kids eat these days." Bones approached Lily carefully, crouching down a few feet from the couch to seem less intimidating. "Hey there, little one. I brought you something." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small stuffed bear with a red ribbon around its neck. Lily's eyes fixed on the toy, but she didn't reach for it. "It's okay," Jack assured her. "Bones might look scary, but he's harmless." Bones placed the bear on the couch beside her and backed away. Lily cautiously picked it up, running her fingers over the soft fur. "You got clothes for her?" Diesel asked Jack quietly. "Kids need lots of clothes. They're messy." "I'm figuring it out," Jack replied, watching as Tank continued to unload groceries. "Planning to get some stuff today?" Diesel nodded toward Lily. "My cousin's wife could help. She's good with kids. Could take her shopping, get her set up proper like." Jack stiffened. "I can handle it." "Jack," Tank said, closing the refrigerator door. None of us doubt you. But this isn't exactly in your wheelhouse, you know? Nothing wrong with getting some help." Bones had moved to the small kitchen table and was emptying his bag. "Got some coloring books, crayons, couple of kids' stories. My sister said these are good for her age." "How old is she anyway?" Diesel asked. 5, I think," Jack answered. "Hospital wasn't sure exactly." The 3 men exchanged glances that Jack didn't miss. He'd known these guys for over 20 years. They'd ridden thousands of miles together, had each other's backs in bar fights and worse. But the look that passed between them now was different. Concern, maybe even doubt. Jack crossed his arms over his chest. "I appreciate the supplies, but I've got this under control." "Sure you do," Diesel said, not sounding convinced. "But the offer stands. Maria would be happy to help. She's raised 3 kids." "Or my sister," Bones added. "She's always saying how her boys need more male influence. She'd probably be thrilled to help you figure this out." Jack looked over at Lily, who was now clutching the bear to her chest, still watching the men with cautious eyes. Something protective surged in him. "Thanks, but no thanks," he said firmly. "I'm doing this myself. I took responsibility for her, and I'm not passing that off to anyone else." "Nobody's saying to pass it off," Tank argued. "Just saying you don't have to do it alone." "Right now, that's exactly what I need to do," Jack insisted. "I need to figure this out my way. She needs stability, not a parade of people coming through trying to help." The 3 bikers exchanged another look, and Diesel shrugged his massive shoulders. "Your call, brother," he said. "But we're here if you need us, day or night." Jack nodded, softening slightly. "I know, and I appreciate the supplies. Really." As his friends moved toward the door, Jack followed them into the hallway, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. "I've got to do this myself," he said in a low voice. "Need to prove I can." Diesel clasped his shoulder. "To who? Us? We believe in you." Jack shook his head. "To myself. And to her." Jack stood in the kitchen, making sandwiches for lunch. 2 days had passed since Lily had come to stay with him, and though she'd been quiet and cooperative, she hadn't said much. Most of her communication had been through nods, head shakes, and one-word answers. He glanced over at her as he spread peanut butter on bread. She sat at the small table, hugging the teddy bear Bones had given her while coloring in one of the books. Her dark hair fell across her face, and her small hand gripped the blue crayon tightly. "Hungry?" he asked, sliding a plate with a sandwich across the table. Lily nodded, setting down her crayon and reaching for the food. Jack sat across from her with his own sandwich, watching as she took small, careful bites. She was still too thin, her wrists like twigs, her cheekbones too sharp for a child her age. The hospital had estimated she was around 5, but they couldn't be certain. "Do you like it?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." Those 2 words, her longest sentence yet, made something warm spread in Jack's chest. Progress, he thought. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Jack wasn't used to making conversation with a child. Most of his adult life had been spent with rough men who communicated in grunts, jokes, and occasionally with their fists. "What did you talk about with the little girl?" To his surprise, Lily broke the silence. "My mom used to cut the crusts off," she said, looking at her sandwich. Jack blinked. "Oh, sorry about that. I can cut them off if you want." Lily shook her head. "It's okay. I'm a big girl now." She took another bite. Jack watched her, feeling strangely nervous. This was the first time she'd mentioned her mother. "What was your mom like?" he asked carefully. Lily looked down at her plate, her small fingers tracing the edge of the sandwich. "She was pretty, and she sang songs to me." "Yeah, what kind of songs?" "Bedtime songs, and happy birthday songs." A small smile touched her lips. "She made a cake for my birthday with 5 candles." Jack nodded, trying to picture it. "When is your birthday?" "April 15th, Lily answered. "I'm 5.5 now." 5.5 is a good age, Jack said, not sure what else to say, but wanting to keep her talking. Lily took another bite of her sandwich, then looked up at him with those solemn brown eyes. "My mom got sick. Her hair fell out." Jack's throat tightened. That happened sometimes when people get the kind of medicine she needed. Lily nodded, as if she already knew this. She was in the hospital for a long time. Then she had to go to heaven. She said it matter-of-factly, but her small fingers tightened around the teddy bear in her lap. "I'm sorry about your mom, Lily," Jack said, his voice rougher than usual. "Grandma took care of me after," Lily continued. "But then she got sick too. She couldn't get out of bed anymore." Jack didn't speak. He just listened, his sandwich forgotten. "Then we had to live with Uncle Pete. He wasn't really my uncle." Her face clouded. "He yelled a lot. He didn't like me." Jack felt a flare of anger toward this unknown man. "What happened then, Lily?" "Grandma went to heaven too. Uncle Pete said I had to go away." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He left me at the bus station. Said someone would come get me, but nobody did." Jack's hands clenched into fists under the table. He forced them to relax. "How long were you alone?" Lily shrugged her small shoulders. "I don't know. It was dark, then light, then dark again." She looked up at him. "I was hungry. I tried to find food, but I didn't have any money. And then I got really tired and everything went black." Her eyes held his. "That's when you found me." Jack's throat felt like it was closing up. He had to swallow hard to speak. "Yeah, that's when I found you." Lily took another bite of her sandwich, seeming relieved to have told her story. "Are you going to leave me somewhere too?" she asked, her voice casual, as if she was asking about the weather. The question hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He looked at this small, brave child who had lost everything and everyone, who had been abandoned, and still found the courage to trust again. His eyes burned, and he blinked rapidly. "No, Lily," he said firmly. "I'm not going to leave you anywhere. You're staying right here with me." Jack sat at the kitchen table, frowning at the worksheet in front of him. The kindergarten assignment seemed simple enough. Help Lily draw her family tree. But as he stared at the blank branches of the tree printed on the paper, he felt completely lost. "Okay, so we need to draw people in your family here," Jack said, tapping the paper with his calloused finger. Lily looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. She'd been enrolled in the local elementary school for just 3 days. The social worker had helped with the paperwork, and Jack had signed everything with nervous hands, feeling like an imposter the whole time. "Like Mommy?" Lily asked quietly. Jack swallowed hard. "Yeah, like your mom." He picked up a pencil and handed it to her. "You want to draw her?" Lily nodded and carefully drew a stick figure with long hair. She wrote "Mom" beside it in wobbly letters, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Good job," Jack said, nodding in approval. "Who else should we put in your tree?" Lily thought for a moment. "Grandma." Jack watched as she drew another stick figure, this one with curly hair. He felt completely out of his element. He had dropped out of high school at 16 to join the Hells Angels. He hadn't sat down to do homework in nearly 30 years, and he certainly had never helped a child with a school assignment. "Your teacher wants us to fill out the whole tree," Jack said, looking at the instruction sheet. "Says it helps her understand your background." Lily stared at the mostly empty branches. "I don't have any more," she said softly. Jack cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the sadness in her voice. "Well, what about your dad? Did you ever meet him?" Lily shook her head. "Mommy said he had to go away before I was born." Jack nodded, not sure what to say. He ran a hand through his graying hair, trying to think. What was he supposed to do with this assignment? He couldn't send Lily back to school with a nearly empty family tree. Kids would make fun of her. Teachers would ask questions. "This is stupid," he muttered, frustration building. He pushed back from the table and stood up, pacing the small kitchen. Why do they need to know all this personal stuff anyway? Lily watched him with wide eyes. Jack felt his temper rising, not at Lily, but at the situation, at his own helplessness. "I don't know how to do this, kid. I'm not good at this school stuff." He gestured at the paper. "I don't know how to help you with this." His voice came out harsher than he intended, and he immediately regretted it when he saw Lily shrink a little in her chair. "I'm sorry," Jack said, taking a deep breath. "I'm not mad at you, He trailed off, unsure how to explain that he felt completely unqualified to be raising a child. That he was afraid he was going to mess up her life even worse than it already was. He sank back down in his chair, staring at the family tree. The blank spaces seemed to mock him. He was a 45-year-old biker with a criminal record and an 8th-grade education. What business did he have trying to raise a little girl? "I can't do this," he mumbled, more to himself than to Lily. "I don't know anything about kids or school or any of this." Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then, to Jack's surprise, she stood up from her chair and walked around the table to him. She reached out and placed her small hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "We can just draw us." Jack looked down at her, his throat suddenly tight. "Us?" Lily nodded and picked up a crayon. She drew a large stick figure with a beard and what looked like a leather jacket. Next to it, she drew a smaller figure with a smiling face. Between them, she drew a heart. "See?" she said. "It's you and me. We're family now." Jack felt something warm and wet on his cheeks, and realized with shock that he was crying. He couldn't remember the last time he had shed tears. Not when his mother died. Not when he'd been shot in that bar fight in Nevada. not even when his best friend had died in that motorcycle crash 10 years ago. But here he was, crying over a child's crayon drawing. Lily reached up and patted his cheek, a strangely adult gesture from such a small person. "Don't be sad, Jack. Everything will be okay." The alarm clock blared at 6:30 a.m. Jack groaned and slapped it silent. For a moment he lay still, staring at the ceiling, the reality of his new life settling over him like a heavy blanket. Then he remembered. Lily needed to be at school by 8 o'clock. He pushed himself out of bed, his joints protesting. At 45, mornings weren't as easy as they once were. The small apartment was quiet as he shuffled to the kitchen to start the coffee maker. He glanced at the calendar hanging on the refrigerator, a new addition to his life. It was covered with notes about school events, doctor appointments, and reminders. "Lily," he called, knocking softly on her bedroom door. "Time to get up. The kid." A muffled groan came from inside, making Jack smile. She wasn't a morning person either. Their morning routine had taken shape over the past few weeks. Jack would make breakfast, usually cereal or toast, though he was getting better at scrambled eggs. Lily would eat while he packed her lunch. Then came the daily struggle with her hair. "Hold still," Jack said, his large hands awkwardly working to gather Lily's fine hair into a ponytail. "I almost got it." "You're pulling," Lily complained, but she stayed in place, knowing from experience that wiggling only made it worse. Jack secured the elastic band and stepped back to assess his work. The ponytail listed slightly to the left, but it was better than yesterday's attempt. "Good enough," he declared. "Get your backpack." The ride to school was something Jack had come to enjoy, so Lily rode on the back of his motorcycle, wearing the small helmet he'd bought her, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist. He drove slower than he ever had in his life, acutely aware of his precious cargo. At the school gate, he helped her off the bike and straightened her jacket. Other parents gave him curious looks. A tattooed, bearded man in a leather vest wasn't the typical elementary school parent. "Got your lunch?" he asked, handing her the paper bag. Lily nodded, taking it. "Remember, Mrs. Ruiz is picking you up today and watching you until I get back from my meeting." "Okay," Lily said, then surprised him with a quick hug before running toward her classroom. Jack watched until she disappeared inside, then climbed back on his motorcycle. He had club business to attend to. The Hells Angels clubhouse was smoky and loud when Jack arrived. The familiar smell of cigarettes, beer, and motor oil greeted him as he walked in. Several members nodded in acknowledgement. "There he is," Bones called out. "How's daddy duty?" The guys laughed, but there was no malice in it. To Jack's surprise, the club had been supportive of his decision to take in Lily. They didn't fully understand it, but they respected it. "She's good," Jack replied, sliding into a chair at the planning table. "What's the situation with the Tucson chapter?" They spent the next hour discussing club business, territory disputes, motorcycle rallies, charity runs. Jack participated, offering his input when needed, but part of his mind remained elsewhere, wondering if Lily was having a good day at school. "You coming to Rockets tonight?" Smitty asked as they wrapped up. "Having a party for his birthday." Jack shook his head. "Can't. Got to pick up Lily from the neighbors by 6. Smitty nodded, not pushing it. "Bring her to the charity barbecue on Sunday. The guys want to see her again." Jack considered it. The club's annual Children's Hospital fundraiser was family-friendly. "Yeah, maybe we will." The rest of his day was filled with errands, grocery shopping, picking up Lily's prescription for her seasonal allergies, and stopping by the hardware store for supplies to fix the leaky bathroom faucet. Everyday tasks that had never been part of his life before. By the time he picked up Lily from Mrs. Ruiz, made dinner, helped with another homework assignment, and got her bathed and ready for bed. Jack was exhausted. But there was a rhythm to it now, a predictable pattern that was becoming comfortable. After tucking Lily in and reading her a chapter from the book they'd started, Jack finally had a moment to himself. He sank onto his bed, not bothering to change out of his jeans and t-shirt. The ceiling fan spun lazily above him. From the other room, he could hear Lily's soft breathing. Outside, the city hummed with nightlife. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the day's tension slowly leave his body. His life had been completely upended. His apartment, once a sparse bachelor pad, now held pink sneakers by the door and colorful drawings on the refrigerator. His schedule revolved around school hours and bedtimes, rather than club meetings and late nights. And yet lying there in the quiet of his transformed home, Jack realized he felt something unfamiliar, a sense of contentment, maybe even peace. The afternoon sun bathed the small backyard in golden light as Jack leaned against the fence, watching Lily. She was chasing a butterfly, her arms outstretched, giggles bursting from her like bubbles. Her dark hair bounced with each step, the ponytail he'd managed to create that morning now slightly askew. Behind him, 3 of his Hell's Angels brothers lounged in folding chairs, beers in hand. They had dropped by unexpectedly, something that would have been welcome just months ago, but now felt like an intrusion on the quiet Saturday routine he'd established with Lily. "So the Tucson deal is going through next week," Bones was saying, his voice gruff from years of cigarettes. "We need to make sure everyone's on the same page before—" "Did you see that?" Jack interrupted, a smile spreading across his weathered face. She almost caught it. The men paused their conversation, turning to look at Lily, who had stopped to catch her breath, hands on her knees as the butterfly fluttered away. "She's something else," Smitty said, taking a swig of beer. "Never thought I'd see you going soft for a kid, Jack." Jack didn't take his eyes off Lily. "Not going soft, just seeing things different now." Lily spotted a dandelion gone to seed and plucked it carefully. She blew on it with all her might, watching the tiny white parachutes float away on the breeze. Her face lit up with wonder, and Jack felt something tighten in his chest. "We still need you at the meeting Tuesday," Bones continued. "Things are getting complicated with the Riverside chapter, and everyone respects your take." Jack nodded absently. "I'll be there. Mrs. Ruiz can watch her." Lily had moved on to drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Her face was scrunched in concentration, her tongue poking out slightly between her lips. Jack recognized that expression. It was the same one she wore when working on her math homework. "What's she drawing?" Rocket asked, coming to stand beside Jack. Jack squinted. "Looks like us, maybe. That bigger stick figure might be me." "With the beard and everything?" Rocket chuckled. Lily looked up then, catching them watching her. She waved excitedly and pointed to her drawing. "Uncle Jack, come see." Jack straightened up from the fence. Uncle Jack was new. She had been calling him just Jack until recently, but the change made his heart do a strange little flip. "Be right back," he told the guys, crossing the yard to where Lily knelt in the dirt. "Look," she said proudly, pointing at her creation. "It's all of us." The drawing was simple but clear. A large stick figure, with what appeared to be a beard and a leather vest, stood in the middle. Around him were 3 slightly smaller figures, also with vests. And holding the hand of the large figure was a tiny stick girl with a ponytail. "That's me," she explained, pointing to the small figure. "And that's you, and those are your friends. We're all together." Jack crouched down beside her, his knees cracking in protest. "It's great, kid." His voice came out rougher than he intended, thick with an emotion he couldn't name. Lily beamed up at him, at the gap where her front tooth had fallen out last week, making her smile even more endearing. "We're a family, right?" Jack swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said softly. "I guess we are." The evening passed quickly after his friends left. Jack grilled burgers for dinner, and Lily chatted about school and the butterfly and 100 other things. But as the kitchen grew dark and Jack switched on the light over the table, a comfortable silence fell between them. Lily pushed the last of her French fries around on her plate, her eyes thoughtful. Jack watched her, noticing how the kitchen light caught the auburn highlights in her hair. Just like her mother's, he imagined. Neither spoke for a long time. There was no need. Something had shifted between them, and something deeper than the daily routines they'd established or the growing ease of their conversations. It was understanding, recognition, belonging. Lily looked up from her plate and met Jack's eyes. She smiled softly, and Jack smiled back. No words were necessary. They were family now. Jack stood in Lily's tiny bedroom, surveying the mess with a mix of amusement and frustration. Clothes were scattered across the floor, and toys spilled out from under the bed. He'd spent weeks trying to teach her about picking up after herself, but the lesson hadn't stuck yet. "This kid," he muttered, shaking his head as he bent down to scoop up a pile of shirts. It was laundry day, and Lily was at school. Jack had planned to use the quiet hours to catch up on chores, and maybe even grab a short nap before she came home with her usual tornado of energy and questions. As he gathered the dirty clothes, a folder slipped out from beneath the bed, its contents spilling across the worn carpet. Colorful papers fanned out, covered in crayon drawings. Jack knelt to gather them up, but his hands froze mid-reach as he caught sight of the first picture. It was a drawing of a man and a little girl. The man was tall with a dark beard and what looked like a leather vest. He was holding hands with a small figure with pigtails. "Me and Until Jack" was scrawled across the top in wobbly letters. Jack picked up the drawing, his calloused fingers gentle against the paper. The date in the corner caught his eye. It was from 3 months ago, and shortly after Lily had come to live with him. He set it aside and picked up another. This one showed the same 2 figures, but they were sitting at a table eating. "Breakfast with Uncle Jack" was written at the bottom. The date on this one was just a week after the first. One by one, Jack gathered the drawings, each telling a story of their life together. Lily had documented everything: trips to the park, watching TV, him tucking her into bed. In every picture, Jack wore his leather vest and had an oversized smile. In every picture, they were together, happy. Then he found one that made his breath catch. It was dated 2 months before he'd found her collapsed on the sidewalk. The drawing showed the same bearded man in a leather vest, but he was riding a motorcycle. A speech bubble next to him read, "I will find you." Jack sat back on his heels, the drawing trembling slightly in his hand. He reached for another from the same period. This one showed the little girl figure standing alone, looking sad. Above her head was a thought bubble with the bearded man inside. His heart thudding painfully against his ribs, Jack sifted through more of the drawings. They went back even further, 6 months, 8 months before they'd met. Each one featuring the same bearded figure on a motorcycle, sometimes watching over her from a distance, sometimes riding toward her. "What the hell?" he whispered, his voice catching. In one picture, dated nearly a year ago, the little girl was holding hands with a woman in a hospital bed. Next to them stood the bearded man, a sad face drawn on him. "Donos until Jack watches over mommy" was written in crayon at the top. Jack's eyes burned as he stared at the collection spread before him. He picked up the earliest drawing he could find. The paper was more worn than the others. The colors faded. It showed the same bearded man standing next to a figure labeled Mommy. They were both smiling, with the little girl figure between them. A memory stirred. Something about Lily's mother having known a biker once. Something he'd dismissed as coincidence when the hospital staff had mentioned it. Jack spread the drawings in chronological order on the floor. The story they told was clear and heartbreaking. In Lily's mind, Uncle Jack had always been there, watching over her, protecting her, even when she was alone. He'd been a guardian angel of sorts, a figure her mother had perhaps told her about, or someone who would come for her someday. And then he had. Jack stared at the drawings in disbelief, his rough hands shaking slightly as he touched each one. All this time he'd thought he was struggling to build a connection with Lily, to earn her trust. But in her mind, that connection had always existed. She had been waiting for him, believing in him, relying on the idea of him long before they'd ever met. The realization settled over him like a physical weight. He wasn't just some stranger who'd happened upon her in her moment of need. He was the fulfillment of a promise she'd been holding on to, a promise he hadn't even known he'd made. Jack was arranging Lily's drawings in a shoebox when his phone buzzed against the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in years. Diesel. Jack stared at it for a long moment, the memories flooding back of wild nights, dangerous rides, and brotherhood that had once seemed unbreakable. His thumb hovered over the screen before he finally answered. Yeah? His voice came out gruffer than he intended. Jackie boy, came the familiar raspy voice. Been a hell of a long time. Jack leaned back against the couch, glancing at Lily's bedroom door. She was napping after school, exhausted from a field trip to the zoo. Diesel, thought you were dead or in prison? Jack kept his voice low. A laugh crackled through the speaker. Both, at different times. I'm back in town. Heard some interesting news about you. Jack tensed. What news? That Jack Stone Cold Miller has gone domestic. Got yourself a kid? That true? Jack's eyes drifted to the drawings spread across his coffee table. Who told you that? Rattlesnake saw you at the grocery store buying cereal with a little girl. Word travels fast in the Brotherhood. There was a pause. Thought I'd check in, see if you needed anything. Jack rubbed his temple. Diesel had been his right-hand man for years before disappearing after a job went wrong. They'd been closer than brothers once. I'm handling it, Jack said. Never doubted that, Diesel replied, but even the toughest bastards need backup sometimes. I'm at Rusty's. Come have a beer, for old times. Jack looked at the clock. Mrs. Henderson next door had agreed to listen for Lily if he needed to run errands. She'd been a godsend these past few months, watching Lily when Jack had to work. One beer, Jack finally said. Give me 30 minutes. After arranging things with Mrs. Henderson and checking on the still sleeping Lily, Jack found himself walking into Rusty's bar. The familiar smell of stale beer and cigarettes hit him like a physical force. It had been his second home once. Diesel sat in the back corner, nursing a bottle of beer. He looked older, with more gray in his beard and deeper lines around his eyes, but the same dangerous glint remained. Jackie boy, Diesel grinned, standing to embrace him in the traditional Hell's Angel hug. Tight, with 3 firm pats on the back. Damn good to see you. Jack settled across from him, accepting the beer the waitress brought over. So, Diesel leaned forward. Tell me about this kid. Jack took a long pull from his beer before answering. Her name's Lily. She's 5. Found her collapsed on the street. No father in the picture. Mother died of cancer. Diesel nodded slowly. And you just took her in? Just like that? Just like that, Jack confirmed, his tone making it clear he wasn't looking for approval. Diesel chuckled. Never thought I'd see the day. Remember Tucson? That bar fight where you put 3 guys in the hospital because one called your bike ugly? Jack's mouth twitched. That was a long time ago. Not that long. Diesel's eyes studied him. Brotherhood misses you, Jack. Been asking about you. I still do my part, Jack said defensively. No one's saying you don't. Diesel raised his hands. Just different now, isn't it? Jack stared into his beer. Everything's different now. They fell into stories of the old days, runs across state lines, parties that lasted days, the women, the fights. With each story, Jack felt the pull of nostalgia, but also a growing distance. Those memories belonged to someone else now. You know, Diesel said after a while, if you need anything for the kid, money, protection, whatever, the Brotherhood's there for you. Always. There was something in his tone that made Jack look up sharply. An unspoken tension hung between them, something Jack couldn't quite identify. I appreciate it, Jack said carefully. But we're good. Diesel nodded, but his eyes held something that made Jack uneasy. Family is everything, right? Blood or chosen, that's what we always said. Jack finished his beer and stood. Need to get back to Lily. Diesel rose, too. The great Jack Miller, domesticated at last. He said it with a smile. But there was an edge to it. As they walked out together, Jack realized that while the Hells Angels would always be part of his DNA, something fundamental had shifted. The Brotherhood that had once been his whole world now felt like just one piece of a larger puzzle. A puzzle that had Lily at its center. Thanks for the beer, Jack said, extending his hand. Diesel clasped it firmly. Family takes care of family, Jackie boy. Remember that. Jack nodded and turned toward home, aware that Diesel watched him go. The gang was still his family, but now he had a different kind of family waiting for him. And that changed everything. Jack's hands fumbled with the coffee pot as he tried to pour himself a cup, spilling dark liquid onto the counter. His mind was still reeling from the phone call he'd received 15 minutes ago. The social worker assigned to Lily's case wanted to meet with him today. Apparently there was an important matter to discuss. He wiped up the spill with a dish rag, his mind racing. What could she want? Had he done something wrong? Was there a problem with the temporary guardianship paperwork? Jack? Lily's small voice came from the kitchen doorway. She stood there in her purple pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can I have pancakes? Jack pushed away his worries and managed a smile. Sure thing, kiddo. Blueberry or plain? Blueberry, please, she said, climbing onto a chair at the kitchen table. As Jack mixed the batter, he watched Lily coloring in her notebook. Her dark hair fell across her face as she concentrated, her small fingers gripping the crayon tightly. In just a few months, she had transformed his life completely. His apartment, once a place he merely slept between rides, was now covered in drawings, stuffed animals, and children's books. After breakfast, he helped Lily get dressed, and then dropped her at Mrs. Henderson's for the afternoon. Be good for Mrs. H., he told her, bending down to her level. I'll pick you up after my meeting. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Lily asked, already distracted by Mrs. Henderson's cat winding between her legs. You bet, Jack promised, feeling a tightness in his chest as he walked away. The social worker, Ms. Reynolds, had suggested meeting at a coffee shop downtown. Jack arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where he could keep his back to the wall, an old habit from his Hells Angels days. He recognized her immediately as she entered, a professional-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a confident walk. "Mr. Miller," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." "Jack," he corrected, shaking her hand. "Something wrong with the guardianship paperwork?" Ms. Reynolds ordered a coffee before answering. "No, nothing's wrong. In fact, Lily seems to be thriving in your care, which is wonderful to see." Jack felt himself relax slightly. "She's a good kid." "She is," Ms. Reynolds agreed. "Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. "I've been considering Lily's long-term situation. As you know, you currently have temporary guardianship." Jack nodded, feeling tension return to his shoulders. I've been thinking about Lily's future," she continued, "about what would be best for her." Something in her tone made Jack's stomach tighten. "And?" Ms. Reynolds set her cup down carefully. "I've worked with many children like Lily over the years, children who've experienced significant trauma and loss." She looked directly at Jack. "I've become quite attached to her during our visits." Jack felt his jaw clench. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she said gently, "that I'm in a position to offer Lily a stable home. I've been approved as an adoptive parent for several years, and I believe I could provide Lily with the kind of environment she needs. A traditional family setting with consistent routines, good schools, and—" She hesitated. "And what?" Jack's voice came out harder than he intended. "Oh, and perhaps more conventional role models," she finished carefully. "I have a spare bedroom already set up, a yard, resources for therapy." "Wait," Jack interrupted, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. "You want to adopt Lily? Take her from me?" Ms. Reynolds looked uncomfortable. "I'm not trying to take her, Mr. Miller. I'm simply offering what might be a more suitable long-term solution. You've done an amazing job with her so far, but raising a child is an enormous commitment. Your lifestyle—" "My lifestyle?" Jack cut in, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your association with the Hells Angels," she clarified. "Your work schedule, your living situation. I just want what's best for Lily." Jack stared at her, a storm of emotions churning inside him. The thought of Lily leaving, of not seeing her drawings on his refrigerator, and of not hearing her laugh at breakfast, it was unbearable. "I appreciate your concern," he said finally, his voice controlled despite the anger and fear coursing through him. "But Lily's staying with me? Mr. Miller, please consider what I'm offering. A stable home, a yard to play in, a woman's influence in her life." Jack stood up, towering over the table. "She has a home. With me." He walked out of the coffee shop, his heart pounding. The bright sunshine outside felt mockingly cheerful as he climbed onto his motorcycle. He sat there for a moment, not starting the engine, just breathing deeply. The thought of losing Lily clawed at his chest. In just a few months, she had become everything to him. The idea of coming home to an empty apartment, of not reading her bedtime stories, of missing her growing up, it was unthinkable. But Jack felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him, fierce and absolute. "She's mine to raise," he said to himself, his hands gripping the handlebars tightly. He was determined not to let her go. Jack couldn't shake the meeting with Ms. Reynolds from his mind as he rode through the city streets. His grip on the handlebars was tight, his jaw clenched beneath his helmet. The nerve of that woman, thinking she could just swoop in and take Lily away. The thought made his stomach twist. He pulled into the parking lot of Rusty's Bar, a dimly lit dive that had been a Hells Angels hangout for decades. He needed advice, and there was only one person he trusted enough to give it. The familiar smell of beer and cigarettes hit him as he pushed through the door. The afternoon crowd was sparse, a few regulars nursing drinks at the bar, their old-timers playing pool in the back. Jack nodded to a few familiar faces as he made his way toward the corner booth where a lanky man with gray-streaked hair sat alone. "Miller," the man said, raising his beer in greeting. "Been a while?" "Ray," Jack acknowledged, sliding into the booth. "Thanks for meeting me." Ray Dawson had been in the Hells Angels longer than anyone Jack knew. At 60, he was semi-retired from club activities, but his opinion still carried weight. More importantly, he'd been the only one who hadn't laughed when Jack first mentioned taking in Lily. "So what's this emergency?" Ray asked, signaling the bartender for another round. Jack rubbed his face wearily. "Social worker wants to adopt Lily herself. Says she can give her a more suitable home." Ray let out a low whistle. "That's rough. Which what are you gonna do?" "Fight it," Jack said without hesitation. "She's not taking Lily." The bartender brought 2 beers, and Jack took a long drink from his. The cold liquid did little to ease the knot in his chest. "You really care about this kid, don't you?" Ray observed. "She's—" Jack struggled to find the words. "She's everything now." Ray nodded, studying Jack's face. "Never thought I'd see the day. Jack Miller, settling down to be a dad." He took a sip of his beer, his expression turning serious. "There's something you should know, Jack. Something I've been sitting on for too long." Jack felt a chill run through him at Ray's tone. "What is it?" Ray leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It's about Lily. Or rather, about where she came from." Jack's beer sat forgotten on the table. "Why, what about her?" "Remember Mikey Tanner?" Jack frowned. "Course I do. Disappeared about 6 years ago. What's he got to do with Lily?" Ray's weathered face was grim. "Mikey didn't just disappear, Jack. He left the club, met a woman, fell hard, wanted out of the life." "Okay," Jack said slowly, still not seeing the connection. "The woman's name was Sarah," Ray continued. "She had cancer, even back then, but she was fighting it, and Mikey was crazy about her." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And their baby daughter?" The world seemed to tilt beneath Jack. "What are you saying, Ray?" "I'm saying Mikey Tanner was Lily's father, Jack. You're Lily." Jack stared at Ray, the words not fully registering. That's not possible. Mikey would have told me." "He wanted a clean break," Ray explained. "Thought it would be safer for them if nobody from his old life knew where he was. Sarah's cancer went into remission for a while. They were happy." Jack's mind raced, memories flooding back. Mikey had been one of his closest friends in the club. They'd ridden together for years, had each other's backs through countless scrapes. And then, one day, Mikey was just gone. "What happened to him?" Jack asked, his voice barely audible over the bar's background noise. Ray's expression darkened. "Highway accident, 2 years ago. Hit and run. By the time I found out and tracked down Sarah, she was sick again. The cancer had come back worse than before." Jack felt like he'd been punched. The timeline fit. Lily would have been about 3 when Mikey died. And then Sarah, fighting cancer alone while caring for a little girl. "Ojo, why didn't you tell me?" Jack demanded, anger rising through his shock. "I only found out recently myself," Ray defended. "An old connection in the hospital recognized Lily's name when you brought her in. Called me." Jack's hands were trembling. He looked down at them, trying to process what he'd just learned. Lily wasn't just some random child he'd rescued. She was Mikey's daughter, his friend's little girl, all this time, and he hadn't known. "She has his eyes," Ray said quietly. "Didn't you ever notice? Same blue, same shape. And suddenly Jack could see it. The resemblance he'd somehow missed. In her smile, too, and the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. A strange sense of guilt washed over him. He should have known. Should have recognized something of his old friend in her. But he hadn't been looking for it. Had never even considered the possibility. Mikey would be grateful, Ray said, interrupting Jack's thoughts. Knowing you're taking care of her. Jack sat back in the booth, stunned by the revelation, feeling the weight of this new knowledge settle over him. Jack sat in his truck outside his apartment complex, the engine off, staring straight ahead. The conversation with Ray had turned his world upside down. Lily wasn't just a girl he'd found by chance. She was Mikey's daughter, his friend's child, the daughter of a man who'd once been like a brother to him. The steering wheel felt cold under his grip. Jack had been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, unable to make himself go inside where Lily was waiting with Mrs. Gunderson, his elderly neighbor who watched her after school. And every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mikey's face, heard his laugh, remembered the bond they'd shared during those years riding together. "Damn it, Mikey," he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" He could picture Mikey now, tall and lean with that crooked smile, always the first to jump into a fight and the last to back down. But there had been another side to him, too. Quieter, thoughtful. Jack had always thought Mikey seemed out of place in the club sometimes, like he was searching for something more, and apparently he'd found it. A family, a daughter. Lily. Jack finally forced himself out of the truck. The evening air was cool against his face as he walked to his apartment, each step heavy with the weight of what he'd learned. When he opened the door, Lily looked up from the kitchen table where she was coloring. "Oh, Jack!" Her face lit up when she saw him, and now he could see it. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Pure Mikey. "Hey, kiddo." His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Mrs. Gunderson gathered her things, chattering about how good Lily had been, and how they'd made cookies together. Jack nodded, thanked her, walked her to the door. All on autopilot. When they were alone, Lily showed him her drawing. "Look, it's us at the park." Jack stared at the crayon figures, a small girl with yellow hair and a big man with a beard, standing under a tree with birds flying overhead. His throat tightened. "That's real nice, Lily." He managed to smile. "How about we order pizza tonight?" Later, after pizza and ice cream and Lily's bath, Jack sat on the edge of her bed for story time. She curled against his side, was small and warm, as he read from her favorite book about a rabbit family. When he finished, she yawned and snuggled under her blankets. "Night, Jack," she mumbled sleepily. "Night, kiddo." He hesitated, then gently brushed her hair back from her forehead. "Sweet dreams." He turned off the light, but remained sitting in the darkness of her room, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Mikey's daughter, his best friend's child, now in his care by some twist of fate or cosmic joke. He wasn't sure which. What would Mikey think about him raising Lily? Would he approve? Jack wasn't father material. He knew that. He was rough, impatient, set in his ways. His life had been bikes and brotherhood, not bedtime stories and school lunches. But as he watched Lily sleep, something shifted inside him. Maybe he wasn't the best choice for her. But maybe that social worker with her nice house and stable job would give Lily a better life. The thought made his chest ache. But wasn't it selfish to keep her just because he couldn't bear to let her go? Jack quietly left Lily's room and went to the kitchen. He poured himself a whiskey, then sat at the table, surrounded by Lily's drawings taped to the walls. Kids playing, flowers growing, and in every single one, a bearded figure that was unmistakably him. He took a long drink, feeling the burn down his throat. The Hells Angels had been his family for over 20 years. They'd had his back when nobody else did, given him a place to belong. But now, this little girl had crawled into his heart and changed everything. Jack ran a hand over his face, exhausted. He'd been trying to be someone he wasn't. A father, a caretaker, but maybe that wasn't the whole truth. Maybe he'd been becoming who he was always meant to be. He glanced toward Lily's room, thinking about Mikey. Would his friend have trusted him with his most precious treasure? Jack wasn't sure, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would die before letting anyone take Lily from him now. Tomorrow, he would call his lawyer. He would fight for custody, do whatever it took. Lily deserved better than him, but until someone pried her from his cold, dead hands, he was all she had. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. 3 sharp knocks on the door made Jack pause as he was fixing Lily's lunch. His hands stilled over the peanut butter sandwich he was making. The social worker had called that morning, saying she needed to discuss Lily's situation with him. Jack knew what that meant. "Coming?" he called, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Lily looked up from where she sat at the table, coloring in her book. "Who's that, Jack?" "Just someone I need to talk to, kiddo. Keep coloring, okay?" He gave her a reassuring smile, though his stomach felt like it was filled with lead. Jack opened the door to find Miss Parker standing there, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest. She wore a kind smile, but Jack could see the determination in her eyes. "Mr. Harris, thank you for seeing me today." Her voice was professional, but warm. "Ms. Parker." Jack stepped aside to let her in, noticing how she scanned the apartment. Looking for problems, he was sure. She spotted Lily at the table. "Hello, Lily. How are you today?" Lily looked up with a shy smile. "I'm good. I'm drawing Jack a picture." "That's lovely," Ms. Parker said, then turned to Jack. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" Jack nodded. "Lily, why don't you go finish that in your room? I'll call you when lunch is ready." Lily gathered her crayons and paper. "Okay." She padded off to her bedroom, turning once to look back at them curiously before closing the door. Jack gestured to the couch. "Have a seat." Ms. Parker sat down, opening her portfolio. "Mr. Harris, I've been reviewing Lily's case extensively. She's making remarkable progress, both emotionally and academically." "She's a smart kid," Jack said, remaining standing, arms crossed over his chest. "Yes, she is. And resilient." Ms. Parker pulled out some papers. "I've come today because we need to discuss her permanent placement." Jack's jaw tightened. "So she has a permanent placement, here, with me." Ms. Parker looked at him sympathetically. "Mr. Harris, I understand you formed an attachment to Lily. What you did for her was heroic, and your temporary guardianship has been beneficial during this difficult transition period." "But?" Jack could hear the edge in his own voice. "But," she continued carefully, "I'm here to offer a solution that would provide Lily with a stable, traditional family environment." She pulled out more paperwork. "I've been approved as an adoptive parent. My husband and I have a lovely home with a yard, in an excellent school district. We can give Lily the kind of childhood every child deserves." Jack felt the blood rushing in his ears. "You want to take her?" "I want what's best for her," Ms. Parker corrected gently. "And I believe that's a permanent home with 2 parents who can offer her stability, routine, and opportunities." Jack walked to the window, looking out at the street below. His motorcycle was parked outside, gleaming in the sunlight. Once that bike had been his whole world. Freedom, brotherhood, escape. Now it was just transportation, a way to get Lily to school on rainy days when they couldn't walk. "You think I can't provide that?" he asked quietly. Ms. Parker sighed. "Mr. Harris, you're a single man with no childcare experience living in a one-bedroom apartment. Your association with the Hells Angels—" "Former association," Jack cut in, turning to face her. "I'm not active anymore." "Even so," she continued, "the court will consider your history. Your lifestyle isn't traditionally conducive to raising a child." Jack ran a hand over his beard, thinking of all the moments with Lily over the past weeks. Teaching her to ride a bike in the parking lot, helping her sound out words in her reading book, holding her when she woke from nightmares, crying for her mother. "Have you asked Lily what she wants?" he asked. Ms. Parker hesitated. Children don't always know what's best for them. Jack walked back to the couch, sitting down heavily across from her. "You know she lost her mom, her dad's gone, and now you want to take her away from the only person she trusts?" "Mr. Harris." "Jack," he corrected. "My name is Jack." "Jack," she amended. "I understand this is difficult, but I'm offering to finalize the adoption of Lily. You could still visit her, be part of her life. But she'd have a mother and father, a proper home." From down the hall came the sound of Lily's door opening. She appeared in the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. "Jack, I finished my picture." Her voice was small, uncertain, as if she sensed the tension in the room. Jack looked at her, then at the social worker, then back to Lily. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. He beckoned to her. "Come here, kiddo." Lily walked over and crawled onto the couch beside him. She handed him the drawing, a picture of the two of them holding hands, standing in front of their apartment building. Above them, in crooked letters, she'd written, "My family." Jack felt something break open inside his chest. He put his arm around her small shoulders, drawing her close, and looked directly at Ms. Parker. "She's staying with me," he said, thought his voice was firm, filled with a newfound strength. Jack was putting away groceries when the rumble of motorcycles filled the air outside. The familiar sound made him pause, a carton of milk halfway to the refrigerator. Lily looked up from where she sat at the table working on her homework. "Is that your friends?" she asked, her pencil hovering over her math worksheet. Jack nodded, setting the milk on the shelf. "Sounds like it." He wiped his hands on his jeans and moved toward the door. "Keep working on those problems, kiddo. I'll be right back." He stepped out onto the small landing outside his apartment just as 3 motorcycles pulled up to the curb. The riders cut their engines, the sudden silence almost as loud as the roar had been. Jack recognized them immediately. Bear, Diesel, and Hawk. The 3 of his oldest friends from the gang. Bear, a mountain of a man with a thick beard and arms covered in tattoos, was the first off his bike. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a grocery sack. Behind him, Diesel and Hawk were doing the same, gathering bags and boxes from their storage compartments. "Hey, brother," Bear called up, his deep voice rumbling across the parking lot. "Thought we'd stop by, see how you're doing with the little one." Jack descended the steps to meet them, offering a hand to each man in turn. Their grips were firm, familiar, a reminder of the brotherhood he'd been part of for so many years. "Wasn't expecting company," Jack said, but he couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. "Yeah, well, word's out about your situation with the social worker," Hawk said, adjusting his sunglasses. But he was the youngest of the 3, lean and wiry, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Thought you might need some backup," Jack raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "Always does," Diesel grunted, hoisting a box of supplies. "You gonna let us in or what? This stuff ain't light." Jack nodded toward the stairs, and the 3 men followed him up to the apartment. When they entered, Lily looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the 3 imposing figures. Jack could see her shrink back slightly in her chair. "Lily, these are some old friends of mine," Jack said, keeping his voice gentle. "They brought us some things." Bear set his bags on the counter and then approached the table slowly, as if Lily were a wild animal he didn't want to startle. For all his size and intimidating appearance, Bear had always had a gentle way about him. "Hey there, little lady," he said, his voice softer than before. "I'm Bear." He pulled something from his pocket, a small plush teddy bear wearing a miniature leather vest. "Thought you might like this." Lily's eyes lit up, but she looked to Jack first, seeking permission. When he nodded, she reached out and took the stuffed animal, a shy smile spreading across her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "We heard you might be staying with Jack here," Diesel said, unpacking groceries onto the counter. "Thought we'd bring by some supplies to help out." Jack was surprised by how much they'd brought. Food, cleaning supplies, even a few children's books, and some new clothes that looked about Lily's size. He watched as Hawk pulled out a colorful backpack and set it near Lily. "It's for school," Hawk explained with a shrug. "My niece helped pick it out." "You guys didn't have to do all this," Jack said, surveying the bounty spread across his small kitchen. "Course we did," Bear replied, crossing his arms over his massive chest. "That's what brothers do." Diesel nodded in agreement. "We take care of our own, always have." "And the kid's one of ours now, too," Hawk added, glancing at Lily, who was already exploring her new backpack with delight. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. Gratitude, surprise, and a deep appreciation for these men who'd ridden through hell and back with him over the years. "The social worker wants to take her," he admitted quietly, moving to the kitchen area where Lily couldn't overhear. "Says I'm not fit to be a parent." Bear's expression darkened. "That so? Want us to have a talk with her?" "No," Jack said quickly. "No strong-arm tactics. Not with this. I need to do this right." "We got your back, whatever you need," Diesel assured him, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Just say the word." Jack looked over at Lily, who was showing her new teddy bear to Hawk. The sight of the tough biker nodding seriously as the little girl explained something about her toy made Jack's heart swell. "Thanks," Jack said, turning back to his friends. "For all of this. It means a lot." The men stayed for another hour, helping put away supplies and even sitting down to join Lily and Jack for an impromptu dinner of spaghetti. When it was time for them to leave, Jack walked them out to their bikes. "You've changed, brother," Bear observed as he straddled his motorcycle. "Oh, never thought I'd see the day Jack Harris would be playing house." Jack chuckled, but there was no denial in it. "Yeah, well, things change. People change." "She's a good kid," Diesel said, pulling on his gloves. "You're doing right by her." "I'm trying," Jack admitted. "Still figuring it all out." Hawk kicked his bike to life, the engine rumbling beneath him. "You need anything at all, you call us." Jack nodded, watching as his friends prepared to depart. "I appreciate the support, but I know it's up to me now. I'm the one who's changed Lily's life forever." Bear revved his engine. "Other way around, brother. She's the one who changed yours." Jack stood at the kitchen counter, nursing a cup of coffee. The apartment was quiet, the morning light filtering through the blinds in gentle streams, but his friend's visit yesterday had left him feeling surprisingly calm. The support they'd shown, not just for him, but for Lily too, meant more than he could say. He took a sip of coffee, savoring the warmth. Beyond the kitchen, he could hear the soft sounds of Lily playing in her room. They'd converted the small office space into a bedroom for her, complete with a second-hand bed frame and colorful sheets that Bear's wife had dropped off last week. The scratching of crayons on paper drifted down the hallway. Lily loved to draw. Jack had bought her a big pack of crayons and a sketchbook, and she spent hours filling the pages with bright colors and shapes. Sometimes Jack would sit with her, watching her small hands move with purpose across the paper. Other times, like now, he gave her space, letting her create in privacy. He finished his coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. Sunday mornings were becoming his favorite time. No rush to get to school, no appointments to keep. Just him and Lily, taking the day at their own pace. The sound of small footsteps made Jack turn. Lily appeared in the doorway, her long hair tangled from sleep, her favorite pajamas, the ones with little stars all over them, slightly too big on her small frame. In her hands, she clutched a piece of paper. "Morning, kiddo," Jack said, drying his hands on a dish towel. "You hungry? I can make pancakes." Lily nodded, but instead of heading to her usual seat at the table, she walked straight to Jack. She held the paper up to him, her eyes wide and hopeful. "I made this for you," she said, her voice soft but clear. Jack took the drawing from her hands. For a moment, he just stared at it, taking in what she'd created. The picture showed two figures standing side by side, one tall with dark hair and a leather jacket that could only be him, and one small with long hair that must be Lily. They were holding hands, both smiling with big, exaggerated grins. What caught Jack's attention most, though, was how she'd drawn a bright, golden glow all around them, like they were standing in a pool of sunshine or surrounded by a warm, loving light. At the top of the page, in careful, wobbly letters, she'd written, "My family." "That's you and me," Lily explained, pointing at the figures. "And that's the happy around us." "The happy?" Jack asked, his voice suddenly thick. Lily nodded solemnly. "The happy feeling? When we're together?" Jack swallowed hard, fighting the unexpected lump in his throat. He'd seen her drawings before, dozens of them over the past few weeks. But something about this one hit different. It wasn't just a picture of them together. It was how she saw them, how she felt when they were together. He knelt down to her level, still holding the drawing. "It's beautiful, Lily. Thank you." She smiled, pleased with his reaction. "I made it special, because you take care of me now." Jack nodded, unable to find words for a moment. When he'd first found her collapsed on that sidewalk, he'd acted on instinct, a need to help, to protect. He never imagined where that moment would lead them. Never imagined this little girl would come to trust him so completely, would see him not just as a caretaker, but as family. "Can we put it on the fridge?" Lily asked, pointing to the refrigerator where several of her other drawings were already displayed. "Absolutely," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. He stood up and carefully placed the drawing in the center of the fridge, securing it with 2 magnets. Lily beamed with pride, looking from the drawing to Jack and back again. "Do you like it? Really like it?" she asked. Jack turned to her, overcome by the depth of what he was feeling. This small, fierce child had trusted him with her life, her happiness, had chosen him to be her family when he'd never thought himself worthy of one. The drawing was more than just crayon on paper. It was proof of her love and trust in him, a trust he had somehow earned despite all his rough edges and past mistakes. "I love it," he said simply, the words inadequate for the fullness in his chest. "It's the best picture anyone's ever made for me. Jack stared at the drawing on the refrigerator, his mind wandering through the strange journey that had brought him here. 6 weeks ago, his life had been so different. He'd been Jack the biker, Jack the tough guy, Jack who didn't need anyone or anything. "Pancakes now?" Lily asked, tugging gently on his jeans. "You bet," he replied, shaking himself from his thoughts. "With chocolate chips?" Her eyes lit up. "Yes, please." As Jack mixed the batter, he watched Lily climb onto her chair at the small kitchen table. She had arranged her stuffed animals, a growing collection donated by various members of the club, in the chair beside her, making sure each one had a good view of the kitchen. He poured the first pancake onto the griddle, listening to the satisfying sizzle, as the routine of making breakfast for someone else still felt new, but not unwelcome. He'd spent most of his adult life taking care of only himself, answering to no one, living by his own rules. He'd thought that freedom made him strong, untouchable. Now he knew better. "You want to flip this one?" he asked, offering the spatula to Lily. She nodded eagerly and slid off her chair. Jack lifted her up so she could reach the stove, keeping a careful hand over hers as she flipped the pancake. "Perfect," he said as she giggled with delight. Back when he'd first patched into the Hells Angels at 23, he'd felt invincible. The leather cut on his back had been like armor, the Brotherhood like an unbreakable shield. For years, he'd worn his toughness like a second skin, never letting anyone see beneath it, or never letting anyone close enough to matter. Yet here he was, making pancakes on a Sunday morning with a 5-year-old who had completely demolished every wall he'd ever built. "Jack," Lily said seriously as they sat down to eat, "can we go to the park today? The one with the big slide?" "Sure thing," he replied, cutting her pancakes into bite-sized pieces. "After breakfast." He watched her eat, her legs swinging happily under the table. In just a few short weeks, her cheeks had filled out, her skin had regained its color, and the haunted look in her eyes had begun to fade. She was healing, and somehow, so was he. Jack had never been one for deep thoughts or soul-searching. Life was what it was. You rode hard, you lived by the code, you didn't ask for help, and you sure as hell didn't show weakness. That's what he'd always believed. But Lily had changed everything. He'd learned that real strength wasn't about being untouchable. It wasn't about keeping people at a distance or never needing anyone. Real strength was having the courage to care about someone else more than yourself. It was making pancakes and going to the park and hanging crayon drawings on your refrigerator. Real strength, he realized, was love. "Can we feed the ducks, too?" Lily asked, syrup smeared across her chin. Jack reached over and wiped it away with a napkin. "If they're at the pond, sure. And can we bring Teddy?" She pointed to the worn teddy bear sitting in the chair beside her, the one possession she'd had with her when Jack found her. "Teddy's always invited," Jack assured her. After breakfast, they got dressed for the day. Jack helped Lily tie her shoes, something he was still getting the hang of, and made sure she had a jacket, even though the morning was warming up nicely. As they prepared to head out, Jack paused in the entryway, looking back at their apartment. His gaze lingered on the drawing, now prominently displayed on the refrigerator, the two figures surrounded by what Lily had called the happy. 6 weeks ago, he couldn't have imagined this life. He couldn't have known that finding a little girl collapsed on the sidewalk would lead him here, to a place where he finally felt whole. Jack took Lily's small hand in his and opened the front door. The morning sun greeted them, bright and full of promise. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't facing it alone. With Lily beside him, Jack walked through the door, ready for whatever came next. The park was bustling with Sunday activity. Children darted across the playground while parents watched from nearby benches. Jack sat on a weathered wooden bench, his large frame looking out of place among the moms and dads in their casual weekend clothes. He still wore his leather jacket. He couldn't quite let that part of himself go, but he'd left his cut at home. Today, he wasn't a Hell's Angel. He was just Jack, watching Lily climb the steps to the big slide for the 5th time. "Watch me, Jack," she called, waving from the top of the slide. "I'm watching, kiddo," he called back, giving her a thumbs up. She pushed off, her face lighting up with joy as she zoomed down. Her laughter carried across the playground, making Jack smile. Oh, it amazed him how easily she found happiness in the simplest things. After the park and duck feeding, they stopped for ice cream. Lily got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles that immediately began to drip down the cone onto her fingers. Jack wiped her hands with a napkin every few minutes, marveling at how quickly a 5-year-old could turn eating ice cream into such a messy adventure. By the time they arrived back home, the afternoon sun was beginning to dip. Lily's cheeks were flushed from the day's activities, her eyes bright with contentment. "Can we watch a movie?" she asked as they settled into their apartment. "Sure thing," Jack replied, helping her out of her jacket. "Go pick one out." While Lily rummaged through the small collection of DVDs, most donated by Jack's biker friends who, surprisingly, had excellent taste in children's movies, Jack made them a snack of apple slices and peanut butter. They settled onto the couch together, the movie starting with cheerful music. Jack wasn't really watching. His attention was on Lily, who leaned comfortably against his side, munching her apple slices and completely absorbed in the colorful animation. "You know what?" Lily said during a quiet moment in the film. "What's that?" Jack asked. "Today was the best day ever." Jack smiled. "Yeah?" She nodded emphatically. "We did everything fun, and you didn't even look at your phone once." Jack felt a twinge of guilt, realizing she'd noticed his occasional distraction. "Well, today was just for us," he said. "Can we have more days just for us?" "As many as you want," he promised. When the movie ended, they made dinner together. Spaghetti, one of the few meals Jack could confidently prepare. Lily stood on a chair beside him at the stove, carefully stirring the sauce under his watchful eye. "My mom used to put carrots in the sauce," Lily said suddenly. "She said I wouldn't notice them that way." Jack glanced at her, surprised. Lily rarely mentioned her mother. "Did it work? Did you notice?" Lily giggled. "Every time. But I pretended I didn't because it made her happy." Jack chuckled. "That was nice of you. Maybe we could try it sometime," she suggested. "We definitely can," Jack agreed, touched that she was sharing this memory with him. After dinner, they sat at the table a little longer. Lily told him about a friend she'd made at school, a girl named Emma, who had the same lunchbox as her. Dr. Jack shared a funny story about how he once got his motorcycle stuck in mud and had to be pulled out by 3 of his biker friends. Lily laughed so hard at his impression of himself covered in mud that she snorted, which only made them both laugh harder. The dishes sat unwashed in the sink, the day's jackets were still draped over chairs, and there was homework in Lily's backpack that would need checking before morning. But none of that mattered right now. In this moment, sitting across from each other at the small kitchen table, sharing stories and laughter, they were simply together. The world outside, with all its complications and challenges, seemed far away. Here, in the warm light of their apartment, they were a family. Jack looked at Lily, her animated expression as she told him about a playground game, and felt something settle deep in his chest. 6 weeks ago, he couldn't have imagined any of this. Now he couldn't imagine his life any other way. Looking at Lily, he saw not just the present moment, but all the moments to come. School plays and birthdays, skinned knees and bedtime stories, growing pains and graduation days. They'd build those memories together, day by day. They'd built something beautiful already, something that would only grow stronger with time. The evening air carried a gentle coolness as Jack and Lily stepped out onto the small porch of their apartment. It wasn't much, just a concrete slab with a weathered railing and 2 mismatched chairs. But tonight, it felt like the perfect place to be. Jack had never paid much attention to sunsets before. They were just something that happened every day, but marking the end of daylight and the beginning of night rides with his brothers. But now, standing beside Lily, he found himself mesmerized by the colors painting the sky. "It's pretty," Lily said, her small hand slipping into his much larger one. "Sure is," Jack agreed, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. The horizon blazed with orange and pink, the sun a glowing half-circle sinking slowly behind the distant buildings. A few scattered clouds caught the light, turning them into floating islands of gold against the deepening blue. Jack glanced down at Lily. Her face was tilted upward, eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle above them. Her expression reminded him of how much he'd missed in life before she came along. How many simple joys he'd overlooked in his rush to be tough, to survive, to keep his guard up. "Jack?" Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Yeah, kiddo? Are we going to stay here forever?" The question hung in the air between them. Jack took a deep breath. "Well, maybe not in this exact apartment, but together? Yeah, that's the plan." Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. "Good. Because I like being with you." Those simple words hit Jack right in the chest. He cleared his throat, trying to push past the sudden tightness there. "I like being with you too, Lily." They fell silent again, watching as the colors in the sky deepened and shifted. The first stars were beginning to appear, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkening canvas above them. Jack thought about all the changes of the past weeks. His apartment, once a place he barely spent time in, was now filled with children's books and colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator. His mornings, once spent nursing hangovers or planning rides, now revolved around making breakfast and walking Lily to school. His life, once a solitary journey interrupted only by the brotherhood of his club, now centered on this small girl who had somehow claimed his heart. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when he felt completely out of his depth, when Lily asked questions he couldn't answer, or when he had to navigate the unfamiliar territory of parent-teacher conferences and children's birthday parties. But somehow those challenges didn't feel like burdens. They felt like gifts, opportunities to grow, to be better than he'd been before. The sun had almost completely disappeared now, leaving just a glow on the horizon. And the streetlights were coming on, casting pools of yellow light along the quiet street below. "Time to head in," Jack said softly. "Got school tomorrow." But Lily didn't move. She was looking up at the darkening sky, her expression thoughtful. "My mom told me once that when people die, they become stars," she said. "Do you think she's up there watching us?" Jack swallowed hard. He wasn't prepared for this question, but he knew Lily deserved an honest answer. "I think she is," he said carefully, "and I think she'd be real proud of you." Lily leaned against his side, still staring upward. "I think she'd be proud of you too, Jack." The words struck him like a physical blow. Proud of him? He'd spent years doing things no one could be proud of. He was a Hell's Angel, not a saint. But looking down at Lily, by seeing the absolute trust in her eyes, Jack felt something shift inside him. Maybe he wasn't the man he should have been. Maybe his past was filled with mistakes and regrets. But right now, in this moment, he was exactly where he needed to be. The last sliver of sun disappeared, leaving them in the gentle darkness of evening. Jack put his arm around Lily's small shoulders, feeling her lean into him with complete trust. "We should go in," he said again, but made no move to leave. For just a few more moments, he wanted to stand here with Lily, taking in the night sky and the quiet street below. Taking in this new life they were building together, this unexpected family they had become. Jack smiled at Lily, feeling complete for the first time in his life. "We're in this together, kid," he whispered, knowing that no matter what happens, Mort, they will face it as a family. "I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day."